Increasing federal subsidies is often intended to lower consumer costs. In American higher education, these injections of capital have consistently coincided with accelerated tuition growth. When the 1944 GI Bill offered returning veterans direct tuition payments, the market responded with rapid expansion. By 1950, the Gray Report revealed that nearly 78% of the institutions flagged for questionable practices were proprietary trade schools absorbing those direct taxpayer payments. Congress responded with the Teague reforms of 1952. By issuing monthly stipends directly to veterans instead of schools, the government forced institutions to compete on price in a transparent market. This shift maintained a low-cost, high-accountability model for 2 decades. The Higher Education Act of 1965 dismantled that model. Title IV of this legislation established the current federal student aid architecture, shifting federal policy away from workforce-oriented investments and toward a debt-subsidized access model. In 1976, legislative amendments restricted the discharge of student loans through bankruptcy. This policy virtually eliminated the financial risk for commercial lenders, fully financializing the lending system. The current student debt crisis reflects a system operating exactly as its historical incentives dictate, as a highly financialized debt dependency loop. Mapping the flow of capital reveals how this machinery operates. The economy begins with 2 primary entities, the federal treasury and Title IV eligible institutions. The primary injection of capital originates in the treasury, flowing into the institutional ecosystem through Pell Grants and Stafford loans. These funds bypass the student. They are routed through the common origination and disbursement system and deposited directly into institutional accounts to cover tuition and fees. Bypassing the consumer eliminates traditional price sensitivity mechanisms. When the primary payer is the government rather than the student, institutions are free to increase spending without the constraints of a competitive market. While commercial firms seek to maximize profit by minimizing costs, nonprofit and public universities operate as prestige-maximizing entities. Their behavior is governed by a framework known as Bowen's laws. This chart models Bowen's core logic. Universities raise all the money they can and spend all the money they raise. In the pursuit of prestige, success is measured by research output, campus amenities, and administrative staffing, creating an environment where costs always rise to meet available revenue. When federal student aid increases, institutions capture that new capital through an internal tax rate on the subsidy, a dynamic explained by Bennett Hypothesis 2.0. Highly selective institutions may appear to pass the federal grant directly to the student. However, they capture this aid over time. By using federal loans to underwrite costs for wealthier students, they raise their sticker price, using the extra revenue to fund campus infrastructure and administrative expansion. Open access and proprietary institutions often apply a tax rate near 100%. These schools peg their tuition prices directly to the maximum combined limit of available federal grants and loans. The pursuit of institutional prestige, combined with the systematic capture of federal subsidies, creates a self-reinforcing cycle of tuition inflation. This guaranteed capital also fuels a private vendor ecosystem. Our system map shows these funds flowing into online program managers, or OPMs. To prevent predatory enrollment, federal law explicitly prohibits universities from paying commission-based bonuses to student recruiters. In 2011, however, the Department of Education issued sub-regulatory guidance creating the bundled services exception. If a private OPM bundles recruitment with IT or marketing services, they can legally circumvent the recruitment ban. This allows these companies to extract 50 to 70% of an online program's gross tuition revenue. This sub-regulatory loophole directs taxpayer-funded educational subsidies toward aggressive corporate marketing, decoupling student enrollment from actual instructional capacity. The system's primary oversight mechanism adds a final node to our map: private accreditors, the gatekeepers of federal aid eligibility. This relationship creates a mutual hostage dynamic. Accreditors control access to federal funds, but they rely entirely on membership fees paid by the schools they are tasked with regulating. GAO investigations reveal that this dependency leads accreditors to prioritize institutional financial solvency. They consistently focus on school survival while failing to enforce meaningful standards for student academic outcomes. Because active university administrators govern these commissions, they function as self-preserving cartels. they strictly enforce compliance standards that heavily prioritize traditional library size and physical infrastructure, making it difficult for lower-cost, innovative competitors to enter the market. By acting as a barrier to market entry, these agencies may be subject to federal Sherman Act antitrust prosecution. Supreme Court precedent holds that regulatory boards controlled by active market participants do not enjoy antitrust immunity without active state supervision. The existing quality gatekeeping framework operates primarily as a protectionist shield for incumbent institutions, insulating them from lower-cost competitors. These federal rules also distort the workforce training market. To qualify for aid, vocational programs must meet strict duration requirements, including a minimum 300 clock-hour threshold. This creates an incentive for artificial program extension. Schools expand a specialized 150-hour technical credential to 300 hours, purely to qualify for the federal subsidy. This distortion has a measurable price. Research in the cosmetology sector indicates that Title IV-eligible proprietary schools charge a tuition premium of approximately 78% over identical, non-eligible programs. These massive premiums incentivize structural fraud. The Maranello Schools of Beauty chain systematically falsified high school diplomas to secure federal loans for unqualified students. In other cases, like Chesapeake Barber College, owners billed the VA millions for sham instruction that veterans never actually received. Federal duration rules frequently mandate sheer inefficiency, driving up consumer costs while making low-debt pathways entirely economically unviable. The completed financial ecosystem map reveals a closed cybernetic system driven by three self-reinforcing feedback loops. First is the financial inflation loop. Federal injections hit prestige-maximizing institutions, fueling administrative expansion and tuition growth, which then triggers the need for further subsidies. Second is the debt dependency loop. Rising tuition generates a larger student loan portfolio, creating revenue for financial servicers who reinvest over $1 billion into political lobbying to protect the existing debt architecture. Third is the compliance complexity loop. Systemic fraud prompts complex federal regulations, which increase compliance overhead and squeeze out small independent trade schools, consolidating power among large incumbents. The interaction of these three loops makes the higher education complex immune to surface-level policy changes. A critical emerging risk to this architecture is the use of generative AI by criminal syndicates to automate student aid fraud rings. Syndicates are deploying AI agents to maintain automated ghost attendance. By generating unique discussion posts and essays, these agents allow fraud rings to extract credit balances across thousands of fake enrollments simultaneously. Addressing these systemic vulnerabilities requires targeting the mechanisms of extraction. The Department of Education should rescind the bundled services exception to eliminate the tuition revenue sharing incentive for OPMs. Furthermore, antitrust regulators must challenge protectionist accreditation standards, and Congress must decouple workforce funding from time-based academic mandates to support competency-based training. Until institutional incentives are tied to student success and financial risk, rather than prestige and enrollment volume, the cybernetic debt machine will continue to extract public wealth at the expense of students.